What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected legends walks into what should be a simple interview, only to face an onslaught of disrespect that crosses every line imaginable? It only took 37 seconds and one comment about his family for Harrison Ford to stand up, look directly into the camera, and walk off set, leaving Bill Maher speechless and the entire studio in absolute shock. The energy in the studio that night felt off from the very beginning. Harrison Ford walked out to applause, waving briefly to the audience before taking his seat across from Bill Maher. The veteran actor, known for his roles that defined generations of cinema, settled into the chair with his characteristic calm demeanor. He was there to talk about his latest project, a documentary about environmental conservation, something he had dedicated years of his life to outside of acting. The audience seemed excited, genuinely thrilled to see someone of his caliber sitting down for what they assumed would be an insightful conversation. But Bill Maher had other plans. Maher started the interview with what seemed like a standard opening, though there was something in his tone that suggested trouble ahead. "So, Harrison Ford, welcome to the show. You know, I have to say, watching you in all these action movies over the years, running around at your age, it makes me wonder, are you trying to prove something, or do you just not know when to retire?" The audience gave an uncomfortable laugh. Ford smiled slightly, brushing it off with grace. "Well, I love what I do. I think as long as you can contribute something meaningful, age is just a number. I still have stories I want to tell." Maher leaned back in his chair with a smirk, clearly not satisfied. Age is just a number. That is what everyone says when they are trying to convince themselves they are still relevant. But let us be honest here. You have been playing the same character for what, 40 years now? Indiana Jones, Han, Solo, all these grumpy guys who punch people and save the day. Do you ever think maybe it is time to let the younger generation take over? Ford shifted in his seat, maintaining his composure. "I do not think it is about one generation taking over from another. The film industry is big enough for everyone. There are incredible young actors doing amazing work, and there is still room for those of us who have been around for a while. It is not a competition." "Not a competition," Maher scoffed. "Everything is a competition, Harrison. And let me tell you, when you are doing stunts and the cameras have to use so many cuts and stunt doubles that we can barely tell it is you, maybe that is a sign." The audience went quiet. A few people murmured disapprovingly. Ford took a breath before responding. "I work with some of the best stunt coordinators and teams in the business. We make sure everything is done safely and looks good on screen. That has been the case throughout my entire career, not just now." Ford's expression shifted slightly. His jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure, though the tension in his body language was becoming more visible. "I think there is room for everyone in this industry. Experience matters. Storytelling matters. The craft of acting is not something that just disappears because you hit a certain age. I am not trying to take anything away from younger actors. I am just doing what I have always done, trying to do good work." Right, Maher interrupted, waving his hand dismissively in a gesture that seemed designed to belittle. "But come on, you have to admit, some of these older actors hanging on, doing these action sequences with stunt doubles and CGI, it is kind of sad, is it not? Like watching someone refuse to leave the party, even though everyone else has gone home. Like watching someone who cannot read the room." The audience fell almost completely silent now. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly, sensing that something was going wrong. Ford sat up straighter, his eyes focused directly on Maher with an intensity that could cut through steel. "I do not think it is sad to be passionate about your work. I do not think it is sad to want to tell stories that matter to you. And I certainly do not think it is sad to continue doing what you love as long as you are physically and mentally capable of doing it well." Maher laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound that echoed through the studio. "Stories that matter. Okay, let us talk about this environmental documentary you are pushing. You fly around in private jets. You own multiple properties. Probably have a carbon footprint the size of a small country. But you want to lecture everyone else about their impact on the environment? Is that not the literal definition of hypocrisy? I have never claimed to be perfect, Ford responded, his voice steady, but with an edge now creeping in. Nobody is perfect, but I am trying to use my platform, whatever influence I might have, to bring attention to issues that are bigger than any one person, bigger than any one lifestyle. Climate change is real. It is happening now, and it affects everyone on this planet, regardless of their politics or their beliefs. Climate change, Maher repeated mockingly, drawing out the words. You know what I think? I think celebrities like you love these causes because it makes you feel important. It gives you something to do between cashing those massive movie checks. You get to feel morally superior while the rest of us actually live in the real world, dealing with real problems. Ford leaned forward slightly, his voice controlled but firm. The environment is a real problem. Rising sea levels are a real problem. Extreme weather events are a real problem. Species going extinct at an alarming rate is a real problem. These things affect real people in the real world. Just because I happen to be fortunate enough to have a platform does not make the issues any less real or important. Fortunate, Maher said with a cynical smile. That's a nice way of putting it. But let us cut through the nonsense here. You are worth millions upon millions of dollars. You have more resources than most people could ever imagine. And yet, you want everyday people. People who are struggling to pay their bills, to worry about their carbon footprint while you are flying around the world promoting movies? Ford took a deep breath, visibly working to maintain his composure. I think we all live in the same world, Bill. And I think dismissing genuine concerns about the environment simply because you disagree with the messenger or because you want to point out their imperfections is pretty short-sighted. Nobody is asking for perfection. We are asking for effort. We are asking for awareness. We are asking people to do what they can. Short-sighted, Maher said, leaning forward now, his tone becoming more aggressive. You want to talk about short-sighted? Let me ask you this, and I think this is a fair question. You have been married, 3 times now? 3 separate marriages that did not work out? And you are out here trying to tell people how to live their lives, trying to tell them about commitment and long-term thinking. Maybe you should focus on getting your own house in order before you start preaching to everyone else about responsibility. The air in the studio changed immediately, becoming thick with tension. Several audience members gasped audibly. Some looked at each other in disbelief. Ford's face hardened visibly, the muscles in his jaw working. His hands gripped the arms of his chair tightly, knuckles whitening. My personal life, my relationships, my marriages, they have absolutely nothing to do with environmental conservation. Nothing whatsoever. Oh, but it does though? Maher pressed on, clearly enjoying the reaction he was getting and not caring about the line he was crossing. Because it speaks to credibility, does it not? It speaks to character. You want people to listen to you about sacrifice and commitment and thinking about future generations when you apparently could not even commit to your own marriages, when you could not make your own relationships work. That is pretty rich, if you ask me. I think you are crossing a line here, Ford said quietly, but there was steel in his voice, a warning that anyone paying attention would recognize. A very clear, very obvious line between asking challenging questions and being deliberately hurtful. Maher shrugged, feigning innocence. I am just asking questions that people are thinking. Is that not what journalism is supposed to be about? Asking the uncomfortable questions, holding people accountable. Or do you want me to just lob you softball questions so you can promote your documentary? There is a fundamental difference between accountability and being deliberately cruel for entertainment, Ford replied, his voice rising slightly despite his efforts to remain calm. There is a difference between asking tough but fair questions and attacking someone's personal life for no reason other than to hurt them and get a reaction. You invited me here to talk about a project I care deeply about, something I have worked on for years, and instead, you are attacking my character. You are attacking my personal life. You are dismissing my work. This is not an interview. This is something else entirely. I invited you here to have a real conversation, Maher shot back, his own voice getting louder. Not to sit here and let you promote your little vanity project without any pushback whatsoever. You Hollywood types, you think you can just show up, say some nice words about saving the planet or whatever cause is trendy this week, and everyone should just bow down and thank you for being so enlightened. Well, I am not buying it. I am not going to sit here and pretend that you are some kind of saint just because you made a documentary. Ford shook his head slowly, a gesture of disappointment more than anger. I have been doing interviews for decades, Bill. Literally decades. I have dealt with tough questions, skeptical journalists, people who disagreed with me, people who challenged my views. All of it. I have sat through hundreds of interviews with all kinds of people. But there is something different about this. There is something fundamentally different about what you are doing here tonight. You are not interested in a conversation. You are not interested in understanding my perspective, or even presenting your own in good faith. You are interested in tearing someone down for your own entertainment, for ratings, for whatever satisfaction you get from this. Oh, please, Maher said with a dismissive laugh that sounded hollow in the increasingly tense atmosphere. Do not play the victim card with me. You are Harrison Ford. You are one of the biggest movie stars on the planet. You have more money and success than most people could ever dream of having. You have lived a life that 99% of humanity could never even imagine. You can handle a few tough questions. You can handle a little bit of criticism. Tough questions are fine, Ford said, his voice rising now, the frustration finally breaking through. I welcome tough questions. I have answered tough questions my entire career. But what you are doing is not asking tough questions, Bill. You are being disrespectful. You are being mean-spirited. You are attacking me personally for no legitimate reason. There is a fundamental difference between challenging someone's ideas and attacking their character, and you know that. You know the difference. You just do not care. Maher leaned back, crossing his arms. Disrespectful. You know what I think is disrespectful? Celebrities who fly around the world on private planes, burning more fuel in one trip than a regular person uses in a year. And then they want to tell us to ride bikes and recycle. That is disrespectful to people's intelligence. I have already addressed that, Ford said firmly. I have acknowledged that I am not perfect, but I am trying to do better, and I am trying to encourage others to do better too. That is all any of us can do. Trying to do better, Maher repeated sarcastically. Is that what you told your ex-wives too? I am trying to do better, honey. I promise this time will be different. The audience went completely silent. Even Maher's own crew looked shocked. Ford stood up slowly, his face a mixture of anger and disappointment. That is enough. Oh, come on, sit down, Maher said, motioning to the chair. We are just getting started. No, Ford said firmly. We are done. I came here tonight in good faith. I came here to talk about something I care about, something that affects all of us. But you have made it clear that you are not interested in having that conversation. You are interested in cheap shots and personal attacks. Maher rolled his eyes. This is what happens when you cannot handle a little heat. You fold. Ford took a step forward, looking directly at Maher. Heat? You think bringing up someone's failed marriages on national television is heat? That is not heat. That is cruelty. And I do not have to sit here and take it. So you are just going to run away? Maher taunted. Very heroic. I am sure Indiana Jones would be proud. Ford paused, then spoke slowly and deliberately. You know what the difference is between the characters I play and people like you? The characters I play actually stand for something. They have principles. They treat people with respect. You hide behind this show and call it honesty. But really, you are just someone who gets off on making others feel small. Wow, Maher said, though his voice had lost some of its confidence. Tell me how you really feel. I just did, Ford replied. And now, I am leaving. Good luck with your show. As Ford turned to walk away, Maher called out, You are making a huge mistake. Nobody walks off my show. Ford stopped and looked back over his shoulder. Then maybe you should think about why that is. Maybe you should think about how you treat your guests. My guests are fine with how I treat them because they can handle real conversation, Maher shot back. No, Ford said quietly. They tolerate it because they think they have to. Because they think this is the price of promoting their work. But I am at a point in my life where I do not have to tolerate being disrespected. Not by you. Not by anyone. The studio audience began to applaud, slowly at first, then building. Maher looked around, clearly not expecting this reaction. Oh, great. Everybody loves the big walk-off. Very dramatic. Ford ignored him, continuing toward the exit. But Maher was not done yet. Hey, Harrison, one more thing. How does it feel knowing that your best work is behind you? That everything from here on out is just a sad attempt to recapture something that is long gone? Ford stopped in his tracks. The entire studio held its breath. He turned around one final time, walking back toward the desk. Maher sat up, perhaps thinking Ford was going to sit back down or engage further. Instead, Ford placed both hands on the desk and leaned in close. You want to know how it feels? Ford said, his voice low but clear. It feels like freedom. Freedom from caring what people like you think. I have spent my entire career working with talented people, telling stories that meant something to audiences around the world. I have had failures. I have had successes, and I have learned from all of it. What have you learned, Bill? Besides how to mock people from behind a desk. Maher opened his mouth to respond, but Ford continued. You sit here every week and you tear people apart. You think it makes you clever, but all it really does is show how empty you are inside. You cannot build anything, so you just destroy. You cannot create anything meaningful, so you just criticize those who do. That is not fair, Maher started, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Fair? Ford said, his voice rising. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair to bring up my personal relationships? Was it fair to mock my age? Was it fair to dismiss work that I genuinely care about? You do not get to talk about fair. The audience erupted in applause again, louder this time. Maher looked flustered, his usual composure cracking. Look, maybe I went a little too far with some of the personal stuff, but that is just how the show works. Then maybe your show does not work, Ford said simply. Maybe what you call entertainment is just cruelty dressed up as honesty. And maybe, just maybe, people are getting tired of it. Maher tried to laugh it off. Come on, you are being way too sensitive about this. Sensitive, Ford repeated. You know, I have been called a lot of things in my life. Difficult, intense, private, but sensitive? That is a new one. And you know what? I am fine with it. I am fine with being sensitive enough to know when I am being disrespected. I am fine with being sensitive enough to walk away from a situation that serves no purpose except to feed someone else's ego. My ego? Maher said defensively. You are the one who cannot handle a simple interview. This was not a simple interview, Ford said, his patience clearly wearing thin. This was an ambush, and the sad part is, you probably do this to every guest who sits in this chair. You probably think it makes for good television, but all it really does is show who you are as a person. Maher stood up now, trying to regain some control of the situation. Okay, you have made your point. You are upset. I get it. But walking off is not going to solve anything. It is going to solve my problem, Ford replied. My problem is that I am sitting across from someone who has no respect for boundaries, no respect for decency, and apparently no respect for his guests. Walking off solves that problem immediately. Fine, Maher said, his voice hardening. Go ahead and leave. But do not expect anyone to forget this. You are going to look like the bad guy here. Ford actually smiled at that. A sad, knowing smile that carried years of experience dealing with media manipulation. You really think so? You really think people are going to watch this and think I am the bad guy? Not the host who mocked my age, dismissed my work, and brought up my failed marriages for no reason other than to hurt me. Not the person who turned what should have been a respectful conversation into a personal attack. Maher did not respond immediately. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and heavy, filling the studio with a tension that was almost physical. That is what I thought, Ford said quietly, his voice carrying a weight of certainty. You know, Bill, you could have had a real conversation. Tonight. You could have asked me genuine questions about environmental conservation, about what I have learned working on this documentary, about the science, about the solutions, about the film industry and how it is changing, about anything meaningful. But instead, you chose this path. You chose to be cruel. You chose to make this personal. And that says everything about you, and absolutely nothing about me. I am not cruel, Maher protested, but his voice was weak now, the bravado gone. I am just honest. I say what other people are thinking, but are too afraid to say. Honesty without compassion is just cruelty, Ford replied, his words cutting through the weak defense. And hiding behind the excuse of honesty, pretending that being mean-spirited is somehow brave or important, does not make it any less cruel. It just makes it cowardly. Real honesty would be examining your own motives, your own behavior, your own need to tear people down. The words hung in the air like an indictment. Maher looked genuinely taken aback for perhaps the first time in the interview, his usual quick wit failing him completely. Ford straightened up, adjusting his jacket with careful, deliberate movements that somehow conveyed both dignity and finality. I'm going to leave now, Ford said calmly, his voice returning to its normal measured tone. And I am going to go home to my family, to people who actually respect me and care about me as a human being, not just as someone to exploit for ratings or entertainment. And you are going to sit here and finish your show, and tomorrow you will probably make jokes about this whole situation, spin it into some story about how I could not handle the truth, or how I was too sensitive for tough questions. But deep down, in that place where you cannot lie to yourself, you are going to know what really happened here tonight. You are going to know that you crossed a line that should never be crossed. And you are going to know that someone finally called you out on it, finally stood up and said enough. Maher sat back down in his chair heavily, looking somehow smaller than he had at the start of the interview. You are overreacting to this whole thing. You are making a mountain out of a molehill. Am I? Ford asked, his eyebrows raising slightly. Or am I just reacting appropriately to being treated poorly? To being disrespected in front of a national audience? There is a difference between overreacting and simply refusing to accept unacceptable behavior, you know? And the fact that you cannot see that difference, the fact that you cannot understand why what you did was wrong, is exactly the problem. That is precisely the issue. As Ford turned to leave for what seemed like the final time, one of the producers stepped forward quickly, moving to intercept him, trying desperately to salvage what was clearly becoming a public relations disaster. Mr. Ford, please, maybe we can take a quick break here and work this out, We can reset. Start fresh. Have a real conversation about your documentary. Ford shook his head politely, but firmly, his mind clearly made up. There is nothing to work out here. I was invited to this show as a guest. Guests are supposed to be treated with a basic level of respect, with basic human decency. That did not happen tonight. That clearly was never going to happen tonight. So I am exercising my right to leave, my right to remove myself from a situation that has become hostile and unproductive. But the segment is not over yet, the producer pleaded, looking genuinely panicked now. We still have 15 minutes left in the interview slot. What are we supposed to do? Ford turned to look at the producer with something approaching sympathy. That is not my problem to solve. I did not create the situation. I came here in good faith, ready to have a meaningful conversation. The fact that it turned into something else entirely is not my responsibility. You will figure something out. You always do. Maher called out one last time from his desk, and there was an unmistakable note of desperation creeping into his voice now. The realization perhaps dawning that this was actually happening. Come on, Harrison, do not be like this. We can still turn this around. We can have a real discussion. I promise, no more personal stuff. We will just talk about the documentary, about the environment, whatever you want. Ford stopped at the very edge of the stage, the exit just a few steps away. Freedom just moments from his grasp. He looked back at Maher one last time, and when he spoke, his voice carried a mixture of exhaustion, disappointment, and an unshakable resolve. Turn what around, Bill. You have already shown everyone who you are tonight. You have shown them your character, your values, your approach to treating other human beings. I have already shown everyone who I am as well. There is nothing left to turn around. The damage is done. The truth is out. There now. People tune into this show for real talk, Maher insisted, his voice taking on an almost pleading quality. They do not want some sanitized, boring interview where everyone pretends everything is perfect and wonderful. They want authenticity. They want honesty. Real talk, Ford repeated, shaking his head slowly. Is that what you call it? Because from where I am standing, from my perspective after sitting through this experience, real talk would involve actual questions about actual topics that matter. Real talk would involve listening to answers instead of just waiting for your next chance to attack. Real talk would involve treating another human being with basic dignity, with basic respect. What you did tonight was not real talk, Bill. It was not honest conversation. It was just mean. It was just cruel. And calling it something else does not change what it actually was. The audience began applauding again, standing this time a clear show of support that must have stung. Maher looked around at his own audience, turning against him, his face flushing red with what might have been embarrassment, or anger, or some combination of both. Oh, so now I am the villain in all this. I am just doing my job. I am doing what I have always done. If your job requires you to be cruel to people, if your job demands that you hurt others for entertainment, maybe you should find a new job, Ford said simply, his words landing with devastating clarity. Or maybe you should rethink how you do this job. There are plenty of interviewers who ask tough questions, who hold people accountable, who have meaningful, challenging conversations without resorting to personal attacks and cheap shots. Maybe learn from them. And with that, Harrison Ford walked off the set, leaving Bill Maher sitting alone at his desk, the studio silent except for the continued applause from the audience. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of Maher's stunned expression as he realized what had just happened. For once in his career, Bill Maher had nothing to say.